Questions and answers from
FIGU Bulletin.
number 110, translated with deepl.com. This is an excerpt. It is an unauthorized and an unofficial preliminary English translation and will contain errors.
An attempt to approach the FIGU Association.
Free community of interest for frontier and creation energy science universal and Billy Meier, Beam.
The Semjase Silver Star Centre, Hinterschmidrüti 1225, 8495 Schmidrüti, is home to the FIGU Association.
Free community of interests, universal.
The association exists since February 1975 and was founded by
Billy
Eduard Albert Meier, called Beam for short, who says that he is in contact with the Pleiars from the constellation of Pleiars, which is located in a different space-time structure, time-shifted to our dimension.
Question: who, what and how? Billy. Eduard A. Meier? How did he get his name, Billy? And how was the Semjase Silver Star Centre created?
Answer: the name,
Billy,
is world famous and can be found 1,000 times on the internet, together with effectively truthful articles, treatises, reports and descriptions, but also with almost endless lies and malicious slander of his adversaries, who maliciously insult him with regard to his person, defame his missionary activity and his contacts with the Pleiars as a swindle, lie and fraud. And this is done despite the fact that his contacts are testified to far more than 100 times by many people who themselves have seen the Pleiarian rayships with their own eyes, as well as Pleiarian people, and not infrequently have had experiences in these contexts. See Witness Book. The name,
Billy,
was given to E. A. Meier in the 1960s in Tehran, Persia, when he worked in a private capacity for various countries and their governments as a detective against crime and criminality. The name was given to him by an American woman from Los Angeles, who compared him to the Western legends Wild Bill Hickok and Billy the Kid because of his appearance and clothing. But he is also called
UFO Meier,
at least in the Zurich Oberland, where he is known to many divided bystanders. In general he is described as media shy, but this is not true, because in fact he only keeps away from the media and journalists and is represented by media representatives of the association, because many journalists spread untruths and slander in their articles about him as a person and figurator, as well as about his work and his contacts. This, together with the fact that the various journalists published in journals and newspapers,
interviews,
never taken place in the style of miserable scribble journalism since his return from the Middle East etc. That is, since April 1977, Billy Meier has been living in the former Hinterschmidrüti farm, which was completely ramshackle in terms of buildings and land when it was taken over, but which was built up by the members of the association, under the expert guidance of Beam as an all-rounder, into the Semjase Silver Star Centre and a world-famous gem, a widely known little paradise. This is of course also admired by many hikers and visitors, as well as of course cultivated by the long-standing core group members, with many passive members also helping out every year.
Question: what is the philosophy of FIGU? Is it religious, a sect, and what obligations does it recognize towards the state, and what is its attitude towards expression and freedom of expression?
Answer: it is not a philosophy, but a teaching called
the teaching of truth, the teaching of the energy of creation, the teaching of life, or what has always been called
the teaching of the spirit. It is absolutely free of religion, sex and politics, and in the same absolute way free of missionary work. And since the FIGU Association is neither a religion nor a sect, but legally a
juridical person,
community, state and religious taxes must be paid. It is therefore forbidden to engage in religious, sectarian, political and missionary activities within the association itself and in relation to its teachings and their dissemination. Only when people, of their own accord and interest, make an effort to contact FIGU and ask for information concerning the teaching, etc. Will information be given and a matter of teaching and ufology be clarified? Thus, neither religion nor sectarianism or politics are allowed in the association, but politics can be conducted in a private way, because this is a private matter which must not be affected by the association. Also official or military matters, as well as all state regulations, obligations and demands etc., in which members of the association are or will be involved, are in any way private and are not influenced by FIGU. Furthermore, FIGU as an association is as neutral as Switzerland as a state is, and with regard to the laws, decrees and regulations etc. given by the state, FIGU behaves absolutely in accordance with the law and therefore does not act in any form against the laws etc. given by the state. However, the freedom of speech according to Article 19, freedom of opinion and information,
General Declaration of Human Rights
of December 10, 1948 is maintained. This also means that every member of the association is aware that he or she can and may freely and openly express his or her personal opinion and that he or she need not fear any reprisals.
Question: how can the teaching be understood if it is not philosophy?
Answer: their
spiritual teaching, or teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life,
basically corresponds to a life teaching that shows how man should first and foremost build, teach, educate, and evolve in relation to his own person in a creative natural way in order to become true and valuable in himself and viable. In the second place, there are the relationships with fellow human beings as well as with nature, all its fauna and flora and life itself, which means that man should become independent and learn in every possible relationship in order to free himself from mistakes and illusions that could affect life and to adjust to the reality and actuality of life.
Question: which errors and illusions are specifically meant?
Answer: specifically, it is all that is faithful to and unnecessarily attentive to, for man is not supposed to believe on principle, but to be effectively knowledgeable in all things and factors that approach him. Effective knowledge, however, can only be there where something can be proven by a fact, which in other words means that the only place where a truth can be found is where it is provably and comprehensibly self-evident from reality and reality. So only the actual reality can contain the effective truth. A belief, however, is always based on an assumption of a conjecture that is far from a provable reality and reality. Only then, when a truth is recognized which is founded in a provable reality and actuality, no more faith is given and also no more possible, because then a certainty is given which is irrevocable. Faith is therefore wrong in every case, whether it is simply when someone says something and this is simply believed, or whether it is in relation to a religious or sectarian belief in relation to a religious or sectarian aberration based on illusions.
Question: but the FIGU members do have their faith, because they are only dependent on believing what Billy tells them, which he cannot prove, because he is the only one and because everybody gets the information only from him and therefore second-hand, which contradicts the fact that one should not believe, because that is what makes one believe.
Answer: this is not true in this way, because the FIGU members do not believe. In principle, they are not forced to believe, as is the case with religions, sects and certain religious philosophies, because no one is dogmatized, indoctrinated, infiltrated, persuaded or influenced in any way by FIGU in relation to the doctrine or anything else. All FIGU members of the core group and the passive group, as well as all acquaintances, friends and interested parties are learners of their own accord, uninfluenced in reason and intellect by unfair, erroneous, illusion-creating and believing attempts at persuasion. They were all learners who work up and elaborate in themselves what they study from the books and writings of Billy Meier, and thus experience in themselves what they learn and create for their lifestyle and life design. Every member who learns must therefore do so at his or her own discretion and according to his or her own understanding and reason, and thus recognize in himself or herself what is right and wrong, and then act accordingly and determine his or her own behavior. So thoughts and feelings are not given, but only the teaching material, which has to be worked through and implemented in life by each person himself and according to his own understanding and reason. So the whole of the teaching is not aimed at the fact that all people have to learn uniformly in the same framework, but in such a way that everyone learns purely individually and according to his own understanding, his own reason, and according to his own judgment. In this way everyone remains independent in himself and also free in his own decisions, without having to believe something that is dogmatically thrown down to be believed. Through the teaching of Beam, man remains absolutely free in himself, in every decision, action and behavior, and through this everyone also becomes free to become, be and also live out through man, so he does not need faith, but only the knowledge of the effective truth, which exists only from the real reality. And he also needs the self-created personal security of what he creates valuable for himself, his own way of life and lifestyle in an honest and fair way for his life and his ability to exist in himself, in connection with good interpersonal relationships, in balance, peace, freedom and harmony, and in a vital way with respect for nature and its fauna and flora. This is what FIGU, its members and Billy stand for and teach: the
teaching of truth, the teaching of the energy of creation, the teaching of life,
or the
spiritual teaching,
which can be read and studied in 365 teaching letters as well as in many thousands of pages of instructive explanations and teaching articles, etc., in more than 60 books and many articles. Yet it is something different to study these works than to read only traditional banal books, from which man cannot learn his effectives but only a school knowledge. The teaching of the energy of creation or
spirituality
does not impart school knowledge or simple general knowledge, but an effective and valuable life teaching, which man must study thoroughly and thus build up himself and his evolution of consciousness. But he cannot do this by faith, but only by using his intelligence and his own perceptive faculty and reason in order to know himself and to form from himself what he must be, namely a true man. To do this, however, he must learn and understand what life is basically about, and that he must be himself and his own ruler over himself in every conceivable relationship, which means that he must be aware of the effective truth that arises solely from the reality of reality. Every religious, sectarian or other belief, however, prevents the effective truth of reality from being known, because it makes man believe something that is erroneous, confused, illusory and even erroneous. Therefore, FIGU and every member of FIGU do not need any faith, but only the truth which is solely based on the reality of reality, which is the only proof that can be accepted, and reality is also that which Billy Meier brings, which has to be proved as truth, because first of all he and therefore also FIGU has photographic evidence of extraterrestrial spaceships, beam ships, which Billy had and was allowed to photograph, which are as real as the sun in the sky, whereby it has long since been proven by experts that these are authentic photographs and not forgeries, and this against all antagonistic lies and slander. Secondly, the
teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life,
proves with absolute certainty that in fact everything in human life is and functions as the teaching teaches, and therefore there is no fibbing in this respect, but a real certainty of the correctness of the teaching, which cannot be found anywhere else in the world and is only taught by FIGU, and that this teaching effectively corresponds to the real reality, that it neither demands nor misleads, nor demands anything stupid, wrong or empty, nor promises something that is impossible to achieve, but is effective all around and advances man in every respect. This is proven by many statements of users of the teaching, who all follow the study of the energy of creation or the study of the spiritual teaching with great effort and confirm the effectiveness of the instructions, teachings and knowledge that give advice. Thirdly, there are many witnesses, see for example, the witness book, who have observed or witnessed Billy photographing beam ships, recording beam ship rounds on tape, etc. Or he witnessed him talking to extraterrestrials. This is in addition to the fact that many witnesses could observe the Pleiar beam ships or even Pleiar people themselves when they visited beam, walked around with him or walked around the center grounds. And as for the second-hand information, it effectively refers to only a few pieces of information given by the Pleiars, which relate to general worldly things and events etc., which are not related to what can be brought in direct connection with the teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life. So there are reports of conversations between the Pleiars and beam, but they have nothing to do with the creation energy teaching, spiritual teaching which is solely mission related and which is worked out, written down and taught by Billy Meier on the basis of the ancient teaching and which is effectively only a manual and a signpost for how and where the human being is in himself, in his world of thoughts, feelings, psychic and consciousness, must touch, begin to touch, and act in order to form a true and viable human being and to be an effectively true and viable human being, who is also in harmony with his fellow human beings as such as well as with nature, its fauna and flora and with all creation in general. So the teaching is in fact an instruction manual, which requires no more and no less than that the person who follows the signpost and follows the instructions takes everything into his own hands, learns and forms everything in himself for the best and good. In this respect, man on earth has been kept ignorant from time immemorial by religions, sects, religious philosophies and rulers of all kinds, so that he has always humbly ducked and could not become himself. The knowledge of creation energy or spiritual knowledge, or any other creation energy knowledge or spiritual knowledge, was forbidden to the ordinary citizen even under death penalty, so it was considered secret knowledge. For this reason, countless people have been sneaky since ancient times and even today, and they do not dare to speak their own mind openly in order to express what moves them deeply in their needs, thoughts, feelings and desires. However, to remedy this earth human abstinence is, among many other things, the task of the creation energy teachings, or rather the task of the creation energy teachings. This is the task of the creation energy teaching, which is spread worldwide through the books and writings of Beam, to enlighten the people of the earth in a modest way and without a missionary form appearing, as is the case with religions and sects in religious philosophies, which leads to a conviction of the need to believe and chains people into the dependence and bondage of a belief.
Question: But mankind has been enlightened since Immanuel Kant created the motto, say period. That should be enough, shouldn't it?
Answer: That is exactly what is not enough, because time does not stand still for man and the world, so that time continues to run just like all progress and evolution. But this also refers to the knowledge in every respect, which must be constantly expanded with all innovations. And this also in connection with the overall development with regard to the thought-feeling psycho-awareness world as well as the behavior of the human being. Since time immemorial, man has generally not learned to form himself in an absolutely conscious way in this respect, but he lives only into the day and acts according to what he has brought into life through education and what he has unconsciously acquired himself, without, however, thinking that he must also educate himself in an absolutely conscious way and make himself a true viable human being. Everyone believes to be the greatest and best and to have learned everything that is necessary and important for his life, but that he must fundamentally shape his inner and outer being to be a true human being and compassionate towards his fellow human beings. nature and its fauna and flora, and therefore also towards all forms of life. This does not even occur to him. For this reason, it does not even occur to him to consciously take appropriate responsibility for his own life and existence, as well as for his actions and behavior, and towards his fellow human beings and the environment as a whole. For this reason, he also turns to religions, sects and false religious philosophies, on whose imaginary deities he places all responsibility, so that he does not have to bear it himself, and so that he can act irresponsibly in disharmony, jealousy, discord, as well as in quarrels, hatred and all kinds of other degeneration. It is therefore in no way sufficient, and man has not been enlightened, that Immanuel Kant is said to have brought the motto,
Sapere,
which is not true anyway, because the Latin saying,
Sapere,
became known through the philosopher Kant, who declared the sequence of words in his essay,
What is Enlightenment?
to be the motto of the Enlightenment. He translated the words with,
Have courage to use your own reason.
But according to the Pleiaric linguists,
Sapere,
in literal German translation means,
dare to exercise reason.
as the beam stated in the small print,
Sapere,
written by him. If these words are primarily associated with Kant, however, they do not go back to him and are therefore wrongly attributed to him, for in fact the saying does lead back to the ancient poet Horace, whose name was actually Quintus Horatius Flaccus, born 65 BC, 8 BC, and who is considered one of the most important poets of the Augustan age along with Virgil, Proper's, Tybalt and Ovid. At first he wrote numerous odes, but from 20 BC onwards he devoted himself mainly to the first book of epistolae, the so-called epistles, or letter poems in hexameter, Greek hexametron, literally,
6 measure,
is the classical measure of epic poetry, in which the saying,
Sapere,
is also mentioned. On earth, unfortunately, there are thousands of religions, sects and false religious philosophies that are so contrary to the reality of reality and its truth that the majority of people on earth are completely confused by the beliefs of one faith or another. Therefore a counterpole is needed with a massive push of enlightenment, founded in reality and its effective and incontrovertible truth, whereby it must be clear that always and in any case provable truth can only ever emerge from the reality of provable reality, as relatively absolute knowledge and as absolute certainty, but never as faith. Faith is never based on truth, but always on unprovable fears, assumptions, needs, apprehensions, expectations, hopes, hypotheses, suppositions, insinuations and suppositions that cannot be proven as truth, as is the case with the heresies of religions and religious sects, as well as with those many philosophies which are religiously false, misleading or otherwise dubious, as these were already misunderstood before ancient times by extraterrestrials who came to Earth and let themselves be glorified here as gods. What the people of the Earth have in their religions and sects, as well as in various false philosophies related to religion and sects, is based on the worship of gods, which was brought about by extraterrestrials in such a way that they were worshipped as gods by the Earthlings, which caused them to abandon their belief in nature, in which they regarded natural beings and natural forms of all kinds as deities and worshipped them. And if there had not been earthly people who had distinguished themselves as founders of religions and sects, and who had acted as cult priests and representatives of the deities etc., and who had consciously and deviously and insidiously misled people with their empty phrases and invented stories about deities, angels, heaven and saints, then no religions and sects would have come into being, but people would have developed in a thought-emotional psychic conscious way and thus in a creational natural way on a total mental level. This would not have led to problems of faith, religion and sex, as has been the case since the existence of religions, sects and false religious philosophies, and through many wars of faith and religion, and through the Christian Inquisition since ancient times. Humanity on earth would have developed in a completely normal way and without religions, sects and false, misleading philosophies, would be devoted to peace, freedom and harmony, and would know neither wars, terrorism nor racial hatred.
Question. It is said that Billy Meier is the only one who is in contact with the Pleiars or the aliens. How can that be?
Answer. That is of course correct, but there are certain reasons for this, namely that the Pleiars are much more advanced or evolutionary in every mental way in relation to the people of the earth, and are therefore vulnerable, sensitive and endangered in this respect in relation to the low overall evolution of the earthly people. It must therefore be remembered that the Pleiars, as a result of their development in consciousness and mentality, have evolved over 25 million to 30 million years, or have evolved at a higher rate. This means that they are much more sensitive in their thought, emotional, psychic consciousness than people here on Earth. Which is why it is very dangerous for them to enter the Earth human mental vibrational area, which unfortunately happened in this respect during an incident in the center. So it requires that Billy must be able to control his entire mental vibration in order to be able to make direct personal and telepathic contact with the Pleiars in an absolutely balanced mental state. Only through this possibility a connection can be established and maintained. In this respect, however, Beam is the only person on Earth who is capable of this, which is why it is he alone who can maintain contact with the Pleiars. The thing that he has the ability to do is not easy, however, because it is based on his mission, which he has to fulfill as a herald and teacher with the teaching of the creation energy teaching or spiritual teaching. The circumstances and prerequisites for his ability and suitability to maintain contact with the extraterrestrials were and still are manifold and necessary, because only through them was it possible for him to control his entire mental vibration in such a way that he can maintain contact with the Pleiars. But Billy is therefore not a Superman, but a simple and modest person who does not make a fuss about himself, who does not let himself be admired or praised, and who does not let himself be judged as something special. It is exactly these facts that prove that others who supposedly want to be in contact with the Pleiars only indulge in fibs, lies and shenanigans, because they want to be admired and put on a raised pedestal and, moreover, earn reputation and money with their stories. But it is also often the case because such male and female alleged
contact persons
are fraudulent, reputable, selfish, or have become deluded and delusional. Others are deceptive or are so self-deceiving as a result of esoteric, religious or other forms of belief that they fall into self-created illusions, delusions and visions.
Question. If FIGU strongly criticizes the world religions, sects and various religious philosophies, is FIGU not the same in principle?
Answer. This is wrong to assume, because unlike religions, their sects and religious philosophies, the teaching of FIGU, the
teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life,
is in no way based on faith. So it cannot be compared with the world religions, sects and religious philosophies, nor can it be equated with them. If, therefore, a comparison were absolutely necessary, it could only be in the form of life training, life-forming training and life-leading training, whereby valuable attitudes of life are built up and learned, which lead to very considerable life experiences and their beneficial life experience. And in contrast to religions, sects and religious philosophies, the FIGU doctrine which Billy Meier teaches is not dependent on any kind of faith, but is solely shaped by the reality of reality and its incontrovertible truth. Therefore, FIGU does not try to convince people of any diffuse
God, angel, saint and Holy Spirit
stories and of other confusing and illusionary fantasy stories, but to teach them that the only way of correctness is to strive for the absolute certainty of reality in relation to reality and its effective, incontrovertible truth. To this end, only the necessary information is provided in books, writings and on the Internet, and lectures and information stands are also held. Lectures, information stands and Internet sites are actively visited, and the information is received, studied and learned, and everything is done by the interested parties at their own discretion, without missionary work, but effectively as free informative factors which people can take in, study and learn according to their own interests, without any compulsory influence. So FIGU does not approach people in order to proselytize them, because FIGU members only approach people when they approach the information stands and address the stand operators directly and out of their own need, interest and desire.
Question. The FIGU members are convinced of their spiritual teaching, which Billy Meier brings as a proclaimer and to which FIGU says that from this teaching they have the truth about life. And why doesn't she approach people more offensively?
Answer. That FIGU has the truth about life is only relative, so neither Billy Meier nor FIGU and its members would claim that they alone know or have the effective truth about life or in any other way. Life and existence contain so many unknowns that it is absolutely impossible for man to know the ultimate truth about anything. This is simply impossible when the almost infinity of the entire universe and of all things and factors is considered, which are so abundant for man that it can never be surveyed, grasped, fathomed and understood by him. It would therefore be a shameful presumption on the part of FIGU, the members of FIGU and Billy, to claim to have the sole or even general truth concerning life, or even the sole whole truth. In principle, FIGU and all its members, as well as Beam as a simple core group member of the statutory association FIGU, dissociate themselves from such an assertion, and the fact that FIGU and all its members do not approach people more aggressively to spread the FIGU doctrine and to gather followers or
believers
by means of fibbing, persuasion and empty misleading and confused promises, is answered by the fact that FIGU and FIGU members are not engaged in missionary work, nor do they carry out any kind of persuasion, as is the case with religions, sects and religion-related philosophies.
Question. Are there no doubts among FIGU members about the etc.?
Answer. It cannot be spoken in the sense of doubt if any questions arise, which in any case are dealt with and everything is clarified in a very detailed and explanatory way, because no questions remain open and unanswered. This is because everything is explained down to the last detail, until the whole thing is also reasonably and satisfactorily dealt with, explained and understood, about which every single person must then of course reflect and, after a mature, strenuous and fruitful thought process, reach the right result and the certainty of the correctness of the whole. Basically, no results are mentioned, because the teaching requires that the person himself researches these and reaches the goal of what must be worked out independently as effect, result, success, solution and impact. It is wrong to assume that doubts are necessary and important, but contrary critical questions which lead to the fact that a matter is dealt with and that it is clarified and explained in detail to the best of one's conscience, ability and capacity. Critical people inevitably have questions that need to be answered and explained in detail. Only people who are hopelessly addicted to fanaticism, faith or bondage in relation to any matter, such as a belief, religion, sect, religious philosophy or human being, have no questions and believe unhesitatingly and unquestioningly everything that is given to them as belief. And such people who are so addicted to a thing are usually the ones who are suspicious and doubtful about the effective truth that emerges from the reality of reality. Since the members of FIGU try to use their brains and their reason to the best of their ability to learn, to study and to question all information coming to them, in order to find out the effective truth, they do not struggle with doubts, but search for truthful answers by asking questions, in order to advance in life in a consciousness-evolutive way and to gain self-confidence, in order to advance in inner freedom and harmony and in inner peace.
Question: Freedom, what is it like in FIGU? In a bulletin there is talk of countless commandments. Is this not a clear contradiction to freedom?
Answer: this question indicates that on the one hand the term
commandments,
and on the other hand also the
concept
freedom is not understood. A commandment does not mean a law, because it is a good advice that can or cannot be followed in order to do something correctly, to avoid harm, etc. A commandment therefore does not in any way demand anything from man, but only recommends with him to decide for himself what to do or not to do for the sake of the best, good, positive and his own advantage, and to do the right thing. And this can be done in the right or wrong, positive or negative, in order to gain something valuable or to expect something disadvantageous. And in order to act in a good or negative framework, every human being must decide for himself according to his own free will, thus giving him the freedom to do so and not being restricted in any way. In this sense, freedom is a state in which a person is absolutely free from certain personal or social ties or obligations which are perceived as constraints or burdens, and is therefore absolutely free in his decisions, etc., including in respect of the observance or non-observance of advice or recommendations which are true. Consequently, commandments cannot be considered as demanding laws, but really only as an offer or recommendation for advice, which does not have to be obeyed in any way, but can be followed or rejected on a voluntary and liberal basis. Thus, a human being is not restricted in his own free decision with regard to commandments or recommendations or advice, but is completely independent and unbound, which allows him to decide and act freely and unhindered by the right to determine and do something at his own discretion. In this sense, commandments mean that man is completely self-sufficient in their handling and execution, and thus self-determining whether he wants to fulfill or reject commandments, for which he must also bear responsibility, whether the result is positive or negative. And that this is indeed the case is proven by the laws and commandments of nature, whereby the laws according to causality give rise to compelling processes and consequences, while the commandments show what should be done correctly in order to achieve good and positive results, but that something bad and negative results from something when it is done wrongly and incorrectly. And when these natural laws and commandments are extended to families, groups, associations and organizations of people, then, in order to guarantee and maintain order, it is inevitable that laws and commandments and directives etc. must be created or given, which means that FIGU must also be part of an order given by statutes, by laws and structures. Only through fixed and fair regulations and thus through laws, commandments and decrees etc. it is possible that an order can be given and maintained, which is to be followed according to the voluntary discretion and free decision of the people, in order to guarantee peace and harmony as well as progress. And only when order functions can everything function properly, be it in relation to a family, acquaintance or friendship, an association or organization etc. Because without a certain order, disorder inevitably develops, but any order which is freely followed is based on freedom, peace and harmony. just as nature and its fauna and flora can develop and exist freely according to the laws and commandments of nature, and it is only when people break the creative natural laws and commandments, for example by introducing poisons into nature and wreaking destruction, sowing hatred, waging war and terror, etc., that they lose their freedom, peace and harmony and are destroyed through their own fault.
Question: do all FIGU core group members have a voluntary function?
Answer: this is correct, because every FIGU core group member, as well as every passive group member, works voluntarily for the mission and its spreading, either by a personal hand in work or in the form of an annual contribution for membership and maintenance of the center and mission. The main tasks and main activities, such as the production of the 3-monthly magazine,
Aquarius Time,
the preparation, production and distribution of books, publications and other materials are the responsibility of the core group members, while the accounting, administrative and fiscal matters and the entire administration of the parent center are handled by the members of the core group, as well as the FIGU country, study and interest groups, which are branched out in various countries.
Question: isn't there a danger in FIGU of individual members making a fist in the sack?
Answer: in FIGU there is freedom of expression as well as personal freedom of action, whereby the personal remains absolutely personal. Furthermore, FIGU's voting rules are such that decisions of any kind can only be adopted and enforced unanimously. If a KG member does not agree with something, he can always veto it and demand explanations. However, if he or she is not prepared to give her yes vote despite explanations, the matter is not put to the vote and may be raised again at a later date, when the member in question may have changed her mind. So there is no reason for a KG member to make a fist in the bag, and should it be that a member cannot agree with something that falls within any of the FIGU's areas of operation, then anyone is free to terminate the FIGU membership and leave the association at their own discretion and will. This is usually the case, which can actually happen when a member sits down over the other members, wants to command them and rule over them, which of course, according to FIGU rules, is not allowed, because commanding is not allowed in the association, precisely because everything must be done, carried out and completed voluntarily and therefore without coercion. But if this is violated, then this is not acceptable. So this also means that every FIGU member has the same rights and that there is no hierarchy, but absolute equality and equal rights, both with regard to the female and male sex and to all tasks and work. It goes without saying that members are also specifically allocated to tasks and work according to their abilities and wishes.
Question: to what extent does a member of FIGU behave differently in everyday life?
Answer: through the doctrine of the energy of creation or the doctrine of the spirit or the doctrine of truth, the doctrine of the energy of creation, the doctrine of life. Man learns to lead his life in the right direction, to get to know himself, to recognize his own faults and weaknesses, as well as those in the field of education, and to change everything for the better and for the good. Recognizing and remedying one's own character and personality deficits naturally has an automatic effect on one's inner and outer being and thus also on behavior patterns, which are increasingly controlled and improved with greater awareness. Thus a general mental as well as rational and intellectual as well as thought-feeling psychic conscious and progressive evolutive change arises, whereby the overall picture of character and personality is changed, renewed and further developed, and a better way of shaping, leading and orienting life is created. As a result, the inner and outer being changes, transforms and becomes more valuable through the reorientation and transformation of thoughts and feelings over the years. This also brings a new and consciously better behavior into everyday life and determines it and its course in a freer, more open, peaceful and harmonious way. Thus, a better occupation with the everyday life itself as well as with regard to the interaction with fellow human beings takes place.
Question: and what exactly is the purpose of the extraterrestrials now?
Answer: there is no need for the extraterrestrials or the Pleiars to be involved in the mission, its processing by beam and its dissemination, because firstly, since the very beginning of contacts with Billy Meier, they have only played the role of an introduction or opening and a factor of imagination in order to draw the attention of the world public and to shake it out of its twilight state of disinterest, indifference, carelessness and unconcern, etc. Connected with this was a probable worldwide controversy, which found its way into the world media as
Billy Meier case
RISP. And secondly, one reason for the appearance of the Pleiars was to show that on July 4, 1947 a UFO crash actually took place in Roswell, USA, through which the Polish-American sausage salesman Eduard Adamski from 1952 on scented a chance with fake photos and untrue UFO stories to appear as a contact person with an alleged Venusian woman named
Kalna,
and to travel the world with his invented story, of course at the expense of his believers. From the Adamski fibs a real worldwide UFO boom developed over the next 5 decades, with dozens and even several hundreds of obnoxious UFO contactors and diffuse, manipulated proof photos. Interestingly, these
contacts,
whose photos and stories were practically all traded as
real
and
true,
while Billy Meier was called a UFO cheater and UFO cheater, just as his world best UFO RISP beam ship pictures were called fakes, but were judged as real and genuine by effective experts after exact analyses. So it was up to the Pleiars to clarify and bring to light the falseness of the usually fake ufology stories concerning alleged contacts with extraterrestrials. Consequently, the worldwide controversy about beam was deliberately brought into being, whereby in the meantime various alleged UFO contactors of both sexes were exposed as cheats, charlatans and swindlers, and this has been achieved in particular by the fact that the worldwide flourishing of the ufology wave with its fibbing, fake pictures and invented contact stories concerning extraterrestrials no longer boomed and became largely uninteresting for the world public, with few UFO exceptions that made headlines worldwide in England, the USA and Belgium etc. And as far as the appearance of the Pleiars in direct connection with beam is concerned, this has nothing to do with the fact that the contacts
would be
used, because basically these between the Pleiars and Billy are based on pure friendship, which is also cultivated with hundreds of official personal contact conversations, which are later retrieved telepathically and written down word for word. And since Billy Meier can also call up and record their
teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life,
from the planetary and cosmic memory banks without the extraterrestrials or the Pleiars, as this teaching has been stored in them since time immemorial and was also taught by all the ancient prophets, no extraterrestrials are needed for this. The teaching itself has been taught on Earth since ancient times, but it has been maliciously falsified by scribblers for personal gain and purpose, giving rise to false religions and sects and religious philosophies, which have cast a spell on people, exploited and enslaved them, and continue to do so today. Although extraterrestrials were basically at the origin of the Earthlings appointing them as gods, the actual religions, sects and religious philosophies which exist on Earth today and which harass their believers with their delusion of faith and make them irredeemably enslaved and exploited in various forms, this can only be attributed to illusory and misleading as well as confused delusional imaginings and delusions, and to the domination of earthly people, who arrogantly and power-addictedly placed themselves in the forefront as priests, messengers of God, representatives of God and the like with religious delusions and sectarian devotional excesses, or deliberately misled their fellow men in a religious hegemonic and selfish way, and to bring this to the people of the earth in an understandable and enlightening way, is another task of the FIGU, which is an independent association and is not under the dictate of the aliens from the Pleiars, so that they are not needed for the mentioned task.
Question: as a non-believer, anti-religionist and denier, how does Billy Meier deal with people of religious faith, and how does he and FIGU members deal with racism?
Answer: Billy makes no distinction between believers in God, non-believers, atheists, philosophers, ideologues etc., nor between rich and poor. For him, all people are simply people, fellow human beings, and as such are taboo for him in terms of attacks concerning their faith, ethnicity, social status or whatever. Billy and all FIGU members have no problems whatsoever with people of any other peoples, which is also proven by the fact that FIGU KG members belong to different peoples, such as Germany, Austria, Cameroon, Africa, Japan, Italy and Switzerland. Also, all FIGU passive members come from peoples around the world, such as Germany, Italy, Austria, Poland, Czech Republic, England, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Japan, China, Hong Kong, USA, Brazil, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Ireland, etc.
Question: what is wrong with religions?
Answer: with their false teachings they do not correspond to the reality of reality and not to its truth, because they claim that the universal physical creation force, which exists as a creation energetic form, corresponds to a deity that must be worshipped and by which the destinies of man and the earth are determined. This God is omnipotent or absolute, omnipotent, unlimited, omnipotent and autocratic, and man is obliged to him in every respect, because he, God, is the Lord, who stands above life and death, above all existence and above all that is and is not. To him unconditional obedience is to be obeyed, and if this is not done and is contrary to his commands, then he decrees punitive measures on sinners to bring them onto the right path. But this corresponds to a delusional representation of purely earth-human manner, just as is thought and acted upon by men who think and act in this way and are thus unfree, dictating, restraining, oppressing and ruling over their fellow men, in order to exploit them in every conceivable way, on the one hand, and to restrict their freedom and deny them peace and harmony, on the other. With the advent of religions, sects and religious philosophies, the whole world of thought, feeling, psyche and consciousness of human beings has been poisoned by religious sectarianism in the manner described above, and as a result they have become dependent on religious sectarianism and have even become enslaved to it. The consequence of this, however, is that in general every person who believes in religion, sects and God is no longer even in the least bit himself, but is dependent on what he wrongly hopes for and desires from his imaginary God through begging, humble prayers, which he will never receive from his divine Lord, because the Lord does not exist, but only corresponds to an illusion created by human delusion. If, however, things come to pass which are begged for, then they are either fulfilled solely because the begging person unconsciously makes an effort for the whole thing and brings it about through his own powers, or it is the result of some hardly or not comprehensible happenings in which the own and external forces of fellow men and the environment play a part. Religious believers, however, do not think about the matter in this respect, but humbly and prayerfully attribute everything to their imaginary God as an effect and fulfillment of prayer. In this way, religious faith has eaten into his brain to such an extent that he gives up on himself and hopes everything and anything only by the grace of God, because the whole thing has crept into his genetics as a delusion of faith in God and has been passed down through generations in the temporal lobe. So it is an inevitable consequence that the whole has a malicious negative effect on consciousness as well as on the thought-feeling psychological world. which can only be transformed back into the normality of correctness and thus into the reality of reality and its truth by a clear mind and by profound reason, and this only when people turn back to these values. This cannot be done by a new religion, sect or religious philosophy, but effectively only by perceiving, understanding and accepting the reality of reality and its truth. For the majority of people on earth it seems obvious that there must be a god or maybe even gods or idols, because he can explain himself erroneously only by the fact that the universe, the world, the fauna and flora and thus also he has come into existence. Perhaps he simply believes in it because his parents, relatives, religion teachers, philosophers or theologians taught him to believe in a god and hammered it into his head, claiming that there are valid reasons for a god creator why man should believe in a god creator, in gods or idols. However, all deity stories are based on some false doctrine and on a false proof of a god existence, because there is no god and therefore no god creator, just as there are no other gods and idols by which the universe, all life and all existence would have been created. In the year 2016 of the Christian calendar, there will be more than 8.5 billion people who profess one of the 6 world religions or one of the sects that have emerged from them, whereby God has many faces when it comes to religions and sects. For Christians, Jews and Muslims, he is a personal and universal creator God, who is said to have created the world, the heavens and the universe from chaos. Man is considered to be the God-created high point, to whom a paradisiacal coexistence of man and God is promised for the end of his life. His death? The religions of Asia, on the other hand, do not know the face of a God or a person, but rather a divine principle, a world soul, which is supposed to be all-seeing, all-hearing and all-comprehending and to work through the whole universe. In other words, a form that can be compared in a certain way to the existence of the universal energy of creation, from which the universe and everything that exists in it has come into being through the physical forces of creation energy. But this does not mean that the religious teachings of the Asian religions can be brought into harmony with the creation energy teachings or the spiritual teachings, because these religions are also far from the natural teachings of truth, creation energy and life. Christians pray to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit and to God the Father. Muslims pray to Allah, Jews follow the commandments of the Torah, or others seek an end to their rebirths. Many go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem and Bethlehem, others to the Kaaba in Mecca or Mount Kailash in Tibet, etc. And all those who have fallen into a belief yearn for heavenly peace, freedom, happiness, harmony and contentment, no matter how these values may come about, even if it is through a holy war, through terror, bloody criminal court, torture, murder, revenge, retribution and hatred, even the triumph of science and the realization that everything of every existence is physically explainable, including all those things that are wrongly called
supernatural
and
supernatural,
has not changed this, and it has also not changed anything about the fact that the man of the earth is in every respect absolutely responsible for everything and anything he does. He alone is responsible for everything, including his life, his health and his entire destiny, and consequently he himself does everything and anything that affects him, for it is only his own thoughts, feelings, actions and deeds that make everything happen in terms of how and what happens to him. But man does not want to see this and does not want to admit it, which is why he clings desperately to his confused religious belief, to his delusional belief in religious heresies, in one God, in several gods or in idols etc. because he simply wants to have a higher power over himself which takes all responsibility away from him, which is not easier than by attaching to a delusional belief in a Godhead who determines everything and is responsible for everything etc. In this delusion everything is also deluded as supernatural and supernatural, which cannot be rationally explained due to the serious ignorance of the people, while those who can explain these things are dismissed as liars, cheats and charlatans. Thus the man of the earth is still today searching for the reality of reality and the truth that emerges from it, as well as for the meaning of life, because he does not want to be taught by the effective creative natural truth, but to be delusional, in a time of great enlightenment, and since he does not want to be taught by the effective truth that emerges from the reality of reality, he is still wandering around disorientated in the chaos of faith and divine disorder, as in the days of Abraham. So it requires that the effective truth concerning religious delusion be made known to the people of the earth, which, however, cannot be done by a new religion, but simply by bringing closer the neutral teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life, or the spiritual teaching. Man must be gently made aware of the effective truth without coercion and thus without missionary work, which in any case only emerges from the reality of reality and cannot be disputed with one iota, because truth is absolutely always reality-based and can only be proven in this way. So a gentle enlightenment is necessary, whereby the fact of the existence of extraterrestrials, of the Pleiars and the contacts with them as hanger and warning call etc. can be very helpful, but they are not needed to confirm or spread the truth teaching or to contribute in any other way to it. Basically, people have to nudge themselves in the right direction, without the direct help of the extraterrestrials. People must learn to think for themselves and begin to turn to the reality of reality and its truth, so that they can finally become realistic, in order to develop and progress in life as a true human being and to create peace, freedom and harmony in themselves and in the near and far environment. And only if the individual acts in this way and passes on everything, something like the principle of a snowball fight will result, whereby everything will be beneficially spread and a comprehensive improvement with regard to all things will occur.
Question: how does the FIGU know all this?
Answer: on the one hand, all FIGU members keep their eyes open and use all their senses to perceive as much as possible of world events in terms of intelligence, climate, natural disasters, politics, religions, sectarianism, terrorism, weather and society, etc., to analyze and rethink everything and draw conclusions about what will develop in the future and what will ultimately result. On the other hand, BEAM and the Pleiars hold many detailed and valuable discussions on all kinds of possible topics, which are very instructive and far-reaching, which are literally recorded in writing and reveal facts which go far beyond a comprehensively good general education and which are also provable in their content. Thus, FIGU and FIGU members have at their disposal extensive information and teaching and learning materials, which cannot be published and made accessible to interested people through schools, television, journals, newspapers and radio or other media in this context.
Question: the English physicist Stephen Hawking spent $100 million on the study of extraterrestrial life. Why doesn't the FIGU tell him that they have already found it?
Answer: on the one hand, it is not the task of FIGU and FIGU members to contact and instruct terrestrial astrophysicists, such as the late theoretical physicist and astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, regarding the existence of extraterrestrial life and especially regarding the Pleiars, because the Pleiar directives would also prohibit personal contact with terrestrial scientists and governments. Although only one attempt at contact was made, with the US government, a CIA intermediary made such impossible and dissuasive demands on the Pleiars that it was decided for all time not to seek further contact or association with earthly powers, and to make contact with earthly scientists, technicians and state powers. This would only have been done in camera and under absolute security measures for the Pleiars, and only on the condition that the advanced, futuristic technology had not been given into the hands of the Earthlings. Thus, in the attempt to contact the USA, if an effective contact had been made, it was only intended to give advice, firstly to create a comprehensive global peace and freedom, and secondly to provide medical knowledge, etc. On the other hand, it must be remembered that the Pleiars are very far superior to the people of the earth in all matters and things concerning the development of their consciousness, as well as with regard to their technology, which enables them to come to earth. What was justifiable in terms of information concerning technology and electronics etc. The Pleiars from the 20th century onward gave to earthly scientists through unconscious developmental impulses, whereby immense inventions and progress in every form of technology and electronics were made very quickly and in a very short time. If this had not been the case, electronics, medicine and technology would not even be at the beginning of development today, let alone in its later infancy, as is the case today.
Question: the books and writings of the FIGU, who writes them, and what is their scope?
Answer: the main writing work is done by Billy Meier, therefore he has written more than 70 very valuable books concerning the
teaching of truth, the teaching of the energy of creation, the teaching of life,
as well as in the form of contact talks etc., as well as brochures, a large part of the
voice of Aquarius age,
as well as predictions and many articles etc. There is also a photo volume of his radiant images, as well as aphorisms, poems and hundreds of articles published in the 3-monthly magazine Voice of Aquarius greater than as well as in books and many bulletins, etc. But it is also the FIGU members who show their writing talent and write countless articles, etc., as well as writing books, such as Guido Moosbrugger, died 2014, Bernadette Brand and H.G. Lanzendorfer, while Eva Berry collects further sayings, poems and aphorisms, which Billy continues to write and which will be published in another volume after his death. Altogether, there are currently about 50,000 pages of written material, size A4 and A5, which Beam alone has brought to the people of the earth.
Question: doesn't this huge volume of books and written material act as a deterrent to people?
Answer: there is certainly no deterrent, because all the written material is written and designed in such a way that each book and each article is self-contained, so even individual works can be read, studied, and understood, even crisscrossing the whole substance of the creation energy teaching or the spiritual teaching or the truth teaching, creation energy teaching, life teaching. There are some major works which, when read and studied, provide a foundation of great knowledge, while other works are specializations in certain areas, but which in any case refer to life and creative knowledge, as well as to the factors of consciousness, the worldly factors, character and personality, the development of behavior and everything that refers to the world of thought, feeling and psychology.
Question: what happens to the FIGU if Billy Meier dies?
Answer: when Billy is no more and has left on earth, or when he has gone his last way, the whole core group, under the leadership of the board of directors of the Mother Centre Semjase Silver Star Centre, Hinterschmidrüti 1225, 8495, Switzerland, will take over the management of FIGU, as well as the supervision of all other FIGU groups of any form, branched out all over the world, in accordance with the association statutes and the association's bylaws.
Question: how will contact with the Pleiars be maintained after the death of Billy Meier, even if the Pleiars mission is not completed, or will a new contact person come?
Answer: it is already clear from the very beginning of the contacts that the Pleiars on the one hand withdraw definitively from the earthly sphere when other extraterrestrials come to Earth and officially contact and connect with the earthly governments and earthly humanity. On the other hand, they will also withdraw from the Earth for good when Beam dies. Truthfully, after the completion of their first task, which consisted in the worldwide announcement of the contacts and the mission by their appearance. They have only been here since then, due to the mutual deep friendship between them and Billy, and so, when he leaves, no new contact person comes to continue the contacts. Their task was already finished when the worldwide controversy about the contacts between them and Billy Meier had brought the necessary fruits, so that since then there is nothing left to do in connection with the mission. And if they are still concerned about the events taking place on Earth, they do so solely for the sake of their own interests and studies, etc.
Question: does this not contradict the basic idea of destroying religions?
Answer: it has never been hinted, said or considered by FIGU, FIGU or any of the FIGU members to destroy the religions on Earth. It is therefore neither in the interest nor the duty of FIGU or of FIGU members, including Billy, to wage a destructive fight against religions, sects and religious philosophies. The task of FIGU and all its members is solely to be enlightening and to work without missionary work in the sense of mission or within the framework of their
teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life.
And if the people of the earth are interested in the teaching or even turn to it by learning and studying, then they do not do so uninfluenced by indoctrination and conviction, but by their own free will and intellect, by their own reason and determination to find the effective truth, which can only emerge from the reality of reality. This is precisely because there simply cannot be any other truth than that which is given by the reality of reality. Everything else corresponds only to a belief that can never be proved to be reality and real.
Question: keyword fraudsters. Billy Meier has accused other contacts of the Pleiars of being fraudsters. Why isn't he the cheat? Why aren't all contact people cheats?
Answer: it was not Billy Meier who described so-called
contact people
as cheats with regard to alleged contacts with the Pleiars, but it was the Pleiars themselves who made it clear that they do not have any contact in personal or telepathic form with people on Earth except with beam, nor through the crazy idiotic claimed functioning of the so-called
channeling.
The Pleiars have from the very beginning distanced themselves from the fraudulent and lying claims of alleged contacts with Earthlings, which they clearly explain to Beam with the request to make this public worldwide. Hence he was acting in the Pleiar name, and this was also the case with regard to the whole
contactorship
around the world, because masses of male and female persons claimed that for some banal reasons, which were usually religious sectarian, they would have contacts with extraterrestrials of different star formations. Correctly, of course, the Pleiars clarified all these claims in the course of the years since 1975 until today and found out that all alleged contacts with other extraterrestrials are just as much lies, fibs, deception and charlatanism as the claims concerning them. The Pleiars. In the beginning of the contacts between Beam and the Pleiars, the
Pleiades in the constellation of Taurus
were deliberately mistaken as the place of origin of the Pleiars, because it was foreseen that after Billy's contacts became known worldwide, many deceitful, glorious and selfish Earthlings of both sexes would claim to be in personal or telepathic contact with the
Pleiadians.
And this is exactly what happened, and consequently the Pleiars officially let the
cat out of the bag
when the climax of the contact lie was reached. Consequently, their effective origin was correctly named, namely not the
Pleiades in the constellation of Taurus,
but the Pleiades, which exist in a different space-time structure and are about 500 light-years away from the Earth. The distance of a light-year is determined by the light that is traveled in 1 year, which is used as a unit of measurement for distances in space. A light-year is therefore the distance that an electromagnetic wave, like light, travels in 1 light second, else, which corresponds to 299,792, 458 kilometers per second. And that beam is not one of the fraudsters, swindlers and charlatans mentioned above in the matter of alleged UFO contacts or contacts with extraterrestrials has been proven more than 100 times by witnesses who have seen and heard him speak with their own eyes together with extraterrestrials and who have also seen and photographed the Pleiades ships. See witness book. In addition, the photos of the Pleiadian ships that Billy took were analyzed and examined by experts, who concluded that they were genuine. Various U.S.-American studies now also prove the authenticity of the beam Pleiadian contacts, which are now being compiled in a book. So the results of the studies say that everything is really like Billy Meier says.
Question: a very important issue for FIGU is overpopulation. Why?
Answer: all the criminal and irresponsible degeneration and machinations of the overpopulation, which is still going on with its current node core. In 2020, not only the climate, nature and its fauna and flora are being destroyed and their innumerable lives exterminated, destroyed, but in general everything that affects the necessary basis of life for all forms of life, and consequently slowly but surely everything that is also vital for the survival of humanity on Earth is being destroyed, whereas in 1978 there were 4 billion people on Earth. In the second decade of the third millennium this figure has now reached more than 9.06 billion, which is already a very high level of what the Earth is capable of supporting in a principle and naturally in a normal and healthy way, and can feed people without more food having to be produced by human activities and nature interventions, nature rape and nature exploitation, and without even a single person having to suffer hunger. But the Earthlings do not care. No, because the responsible people and the governments trivialize the whole thing and lie through their statistics even more than 1 billion people away from those who effectively populate the world. Therefore they talk about
only
about 7 billion Earthlings. The Earth is in fact a planet, and a wonderful one at that, which, with all the trimmings and without any problems, could support and feed 529 million people. However, man has created a vast overpopulation and continues to drive it up, forcing him for decades, and will continue to do so, to drive all food plants and various animal species to supernatural heights through chemistry, genetic manipulation and new breeding. But that is not all, because the growing overpopulation also means that the exploitation of soil and earth of all other kinds, including the exploitation of raw materials, must be pushed ever further to meet the inexorably increasing demand for all substances. But the longer and the less successful this is, the fact that the destruction of usable land area is also being driven forward by madness overpopulation, as well as by chemicals and the expansion of living space, etc., is something that no one speaks openly about at all. Just as little as the fact that many foods to be consumed by man are poisonous and impregnated with chemicals and are slowly but surely poisoning the whole of humanity, whereby even the majority of food consists only of chemicals. Originally there were only as many people living in every single region of the world as the area in question was able to feed naturally. Chemistry and other poisons, genetic manipulation and new breeding of plants and the most intensive exploitation of the soil were still completely unknown, as was the destruction of the climate, nature, its fauna and flora, and the thousand-fold extinction of life forms such as plants, animals, birds, amphibians and reptiles, etc. This, however, changed rapidly when, at the time of the Middle Ages, especially at the time of the Great French Revolution, the crazy idea arose that there had to be many more people if one wanted to revolt against the authorities in order to overthrow them. So the people incited each other to witness descendants in order to become mighty and powerful. But Christianity, with its religion and sex, was particularly involved in this, and Catholicism in particular, as well as other religions, which preached as powerfully as ever through their insane doctrine,
"Go and multiply,"
a slogan that is still being preached today by the Catholic chief priest and his Cossack henchmen in Rome and by their satellites, and which is still being carried out into the world, so that in all the countries of the world a guinea pig-like reproduction of mankind may take place for the purpose of
sheep farming,
and the diligent
sheep feeders.
The resulting overpopulation of course needs accordingly more food, much more energy, much more raw materials and much more. With regard to food alone, it can only end up in the fact that natural plant products will soon be rare, because the entire food requirement for mankind, which is completely overflowing with masses, can only be produced by purely chemical means. This is already partly the case today, because the demand for food has been growing inexorably over the past decades. However, not only the problem of obtaining food has increased inexorably, but also the problem of energy shortage, water and breathing air, which is becoming increasingly polluted. There are many other things to be mentioned, but this would fill many pages.
Remember to always smile.